Good evening, everybody. Welcome to CDM for July 2019. Looks like Sage may not be making it, so we can go ahead and get started without him. Let's see, looks like the first topic is Rados ping times. David, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I guess if we look at the pad, we can look at that. Yeah, I just realized that I thought MSEC was the abbreviation for microseconds, and I was just looking that up, and it says that MS and MSEC are both represent milliseconds. So guess I'll have to fix that.
Yeah, it's good to
So,
be correct about the units. So it's good to get the
right,
units right.
right. Well, I was just using the wrong name for it, or I don't know what's the abbreviation for microseconds?
Though you need like a micro, like Greek letter.
Well, that's tough in ASCII.
Yeah, I think you can use USEC as in USEC. I think possibly
Okay.
would be microseconds.
That looks closest to mu, I'd say.
Okay, cool. So I'll make that change. So off of the link that Neha just posted, there's the pad. And I have a pull request already, and there's example output here that shows. So I set the warning level to 1 microsecond. So anything over 1, it's going to report basically on all my connections. So we can see that the back interface had a long ping time, and the longest one is shown in the summary, and same thing with the front interface. And if you go detail, you'll get up to 10, showing you which connections on which interfaces. And then I changed the algorithm, but possibly improving right now is showing if, as long as it's going from largest to smallest, no, smallest to largest, meaning it's been lately been going. Okay, so, sorry, I should have prefaced this with, we currently do 1 minute, 5 minute, and 15-minute intervals and get the average ping time across those intervals. So if you see in the example where it says possibly improving, as long as the 5 minute is less than the 15 minute and the 1 minute is less than the 5 minute, then it'll say possibly improving, although otherwise it will not. So you can dump the ping times of a given given OSD. That's the next example.
David, sorry to interrupt you, but maybe you can share your screen, because this is going to be recorded, and for folks who are going to watch the video, they won't be able to understand what you're talking about.
Oh, good idea. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Might help to just give a brief high-level background for what you're trying to do with this too.
Well, the high-level background is we want to detect slow network connectivity, so that if you are also getting slow operations, you would know to check your network first, because you're going to see both. Networks are slow, and then possibly operations are slow. Maybe your operations aren't slow yet, but just your network's slow, but you could be heading for trouble. So you will get a warning. Right now, and obviously, if anybody has suggestions on who's familiar with common network communication time, like, is 1 second just so large that it's, you could run into trouble at smaller amounts of ping, delays. Otherwise, we can experiment and we'll see what happens in the real world with that warning level. It is configurable. And then, as I said, the intervals are the 1 minute, the 5 minute, and the 15 minute. So let me share this. There we go. So I'm going to skip down to the examples so it's just clear. The first one here is the summary that shows the longest on the back interface and the longest on the front interface across every interconnect. So it gets reported to the manager. The detailed ones here, which shows that it's being truncated. And it shows you which connection. Now, it seems like as a future item, if you knew how the switches are connected or what racks OSDs are in, there might be more ways of sort of sorting this such that you could see that, oh, this switch is failing because it's only, say, the rack-to-rack communication that's going slow. But we don't have that right now. If you query an OSD, I changed this, Josh, from what you might have seen before, so that there's consistency with the manager output. So if you query an OSD, you'll just see every heartbeat interval average that it's maintaining to every other OSD. I put a 0 here so it would dump everything out. If you don't specify, it will only show you the ones that exceed the warning level. So you might see an empty JSON array here if OSD 0 is not affected, right? He's got nothing as slow as a second. So I just put the 0 in just so we can see what the output looks like.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like a network monitoring tool or some other monitoring tool, if you wanted to import that information, you could just always use dump network 0 and pull it periodically.
Right. Because like in a large cluster, there's going to be a lot of interconnects for each OSD. And then, so if I'm scrolling down to the manager here, so now this is going to be every OSD to every other OSD that are connected. Not every OSD talks to every other OSD, but this will be the complete information. I'm assuming, though, that in the real world, you might want to use the value here to hone in on trouble and get kind of like smaller sets of, the worst culprits to figure out like what might be going wrong.
Sure, that makes sense.
So those are the example output. So some of these things have already been done. So I guess things to talk about for either inclusion. So I have a pull request, which you can see at the top here, that does all of these examples. So we either are going to get any suggestions from everybody on follow-on or even inclusion in this first version. So something that we talked about was instead of averaging over the interval is to get the worst ping during the interval instead. Now, if anybody knows more about networking hardware, networking failures that could suggest whether the average is better or the maximum or something else as we're monitoring during these intervals. That would be great to
Maybe
hear.
both. You could do both. Do the average and the
Okay.
max.
Okay. So would you say that it should be so I'm keeping track of 1 minute data, and then I average that into the last 5 minutes and then the last 15. So is 5 minute maximum, is that the maximum of each of those minutes, or is it the average of the maximums of the 1 minute maximums? Maybe it
I
doesn't
think
make
it's
that
the
much of
max
a
of the
difference.
sample over that period.
Okay.
I was wondering, does this have any way of detecting or representing cases where there was an MS handle reset fired? No, hang on. This is the heartbeat interfaces, which are lossy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. We ought to be able to notice when the messenger needed to rehandshake. That I think would actually be one of the most valuable things we could possibly have here.
Just counting how many times they reset.
Exactly. Not for this pull request, I mean, but for the future.
But it would be
For
kind of
connection
part of
stability
this.
purposes.
But it would kind of be part of this network analysis
Oh, I think so, yeah.
counting.
It indicates that that particular link is unable to maintain a stable TCP connection, potentially.
Okay.
Would you have to disambiguate that with like new connections when the OSD say restarts or something?
Possibly. You could just not count that one. That is the first time it establishes. I mean, there's heartbeat state associated with each target, right? The first time you establish a heartbeat, you obviously don't increment that counter, but for every subsequent one.
Okay.
Well, because in the common case, it would never happen, right? If the TCP connections were perfectly stable, then you'd just never get an MS kind of reset.
Yeah.
So is it a warning if it ever resets, or if it starts like resetting more than once over some period?
I think well, at least it should be available in the detailed dump, and maybe it's a warning if it happens. Like, honestly, once feels like a warning to me.
It'd be interesting to see how it acts in a real cluster. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah, before we decide whether
periodically.
that's a warning. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Kind of the first one is definitely put into details. That just seems helpful. But
Yeah. So
Okay.
backing up just 1 sec. So over the course of each minute interval, you keep track of the average and the max, and then you also want a 5 and a 15. Does that mean that you keep the last 15 1 minute intervals in like a vector?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, got it. I like that. Okay.
I think that was your suggestion.
Yeah,
It's,
because it's a small number, and
actually, it's 16, but so we don't care about that one. But it's
yeah, right. Okay.
So then we were also talking about having the single last ping time so that maybe some external tool could query that at a regular clip and graph the raw data. It seems like it's a lot of polling
Mm-hmm.
for that scenario, but then the OSD doesn't have to store individual ping times. We can stick with our 16 buckets that are totaling in order to average.
Yeah. I mean, I bet if we had the min and the max and the average, and even if you scrape that like at a 1 minute or one, yeah, at a 1 minute interval, um,
You could graph that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think I
so it'll
agree. I
be a
mean,
one.
it's kind of representative of the. You don't necessarily need the last one.
I mean, we could include it too, just because I guess, but um, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, the thing is that for it's like I think the interval is like 10 seconds. Is that what the current ping interval is? Can't remember.
It's 6 seconds.
Bigger than I thought it was. Yeah,
Unfortunately, it's not exactly 6 seconds. It's a random value between zero point 0.5 and 5.9, I think, based on the 6 seconds.
yeah,
So it isn't a precise minute either, right? Because
yeah,
when the next heartbeat triggers, it sees whether a minute has gone by. But at that point, obviously, it could be, a minute and 5 seconds, but
yeah, yeah.
probably okay.
That should be fine, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and I did change the config in my pull request to a dev option, and so you would completely make this mechanism invalid if you change the interval to greater than 30 seconds or greater than for sure, obviously greater than 60
Yeah.
seconds. So I changed it to a dev option, and it has a restricted range, even if you
Give
did
it a
want to
max
change it.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the max is 60, so I guess it would get one trigger per. It would only get one
Yeah.
trigger per minute. So,
Yeah. Okay.
um,
Okay.
oh, yeah, this one's a pain to do because I'm actually using this value in the MonWarn on slow ping time. I'm using it in the manager, the Mon, and the OSD. With the new config stuff, everybody gets consistent view, right?
Yeah. Unless they set the option in like for a specific monitor or only in the mon section or something like that. But
Right.
um, you're not the only one. There are a whole bunch of options that are like that, where the naming is sort of confusing. And they're
Oh
confusing.
yeah. Well,
So
yeah, I called it Mon. Well, because the Mon produces the warnings, even though
yeah,
it's part of the dump output mechanism.
yeah,
It is for the warnings. That's why I did call it
yeah.
Mon warn. So if from now on we can kind of assume that configs are, for the most part, always the same on
Hmm.
all types, and in this case, it's nothing critical or anything. If it's
Yeah,
not going
I
to
think it's
break the
fine.
world, But so I could do this thing where if you set the warning to, like if you change the grace period down and don't change the ping time warning down, then you would you would declare OSDs down before you would even warn them that their network is slow.
I like the idea of just making it a ratio. Seems simpler, a little bit less
So a
fragile.
ratio of the
Of
grace.
heartbeat grace, yeah. And then
Yeah.
just make it like 0.5 or whatever it is, 0.8, whatever makes sense.
Right. I forget Josh, do you remember what the grace was? Yeah, it might
Not
be
off the
like
top of my
20
head.
seconds.
That sounds right, 20, yeah.
20 seconds. So the default is going to be like 1/20th. Yeah, so 5%. Okay. And so a big item is if we handled load averages if we added load averages to the heartbeats, then we could kind of see that, oh, well, this guy is slow to respond to a ping, but hey, we can see his load is high, and so it probably wasn't the network. Now, I don't know what the math is going to be on that, how much load to how much. I mean, it's probably going to be tough because of how many CPUs. Yeah, I don't know how well the load average is getting us what we want to know.
It used to have load a long time ago,
Oh.
like in the early days, but we weren't using it.
I mean,
Just
if
have
we
this
collect
peer.
it and dump it into the manager, we can let it run on a cluster for a bit, collect data, and see if there's a useful relationship.
And that's a good idea. We could certainly induce some scenarios where an OSD is CPU bound and see what it looks like on the other side.
And also being able to collect load averages seems handy.
So should we for example, in the manager output here, if we had the load average of maybe OSD2, so we would know, it would give us a context for those ping times.
Right. Or it wouldn't, which would also be interesting. Although it's not entirely clear that it needs to be in the ping message, right? Because the load average will be the same to all.
Yeah,
So this is
think
an additional thing that we might want to collect from the OSDs, generally speaking.
Yeah, I don't think the peers need to know what the peer of load is.
No.
Not at this point, at least.
Right. Well, so so you don't want to collect. So if I'm heartbeating to OSD 10, you're saying I don't need to save his load. Oh, right. I don't need to save his load and then report that to everybody would be reporting the same load. Okay. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the only
Just
thing
reporting one
is
zone
then,
load would probably be adequate.
right. Well, internally, yeah, but I mean, I guess this dump won't be able to have that
Oh, I
unless
see.
he's that's
Yeah,
maintaining
true. It would be
those.
something the manager would want to maintain or something.
Right. I mean, now that I've been playing with this, I'm almost wondering if we even care about having the OSD report his heartbeats. I mean, maybe you could have an option to the manager one that just says only show me OSD 0. I mean, there's a bit of a delay of him flushing to the manager, but
Well,
You might want to talk to an OSD because the OSDs, if they're down before they try to boot themselves up again, they continue pinging their peers. And so I can see a scenario where you want to ask the OSD directly.
okay.
I do agree that for the most part, people would probably use the manager version, though.
Yeah.
Right. So then maybe it isn't so bad that we'd only see the load on the manager version because we're not going to actually exchange load on every heartbeat.
And that likely wouldn't be the only input we'd use for something that tries to suss out what's wrong with an OSD. It would just be another one.
Right. And then obviously we have that information or multiple pieces of information. So, this is why the OSD would want to collect load, because then he could say, OSD2's heavily loaded. I'm not going to kill him after the 20 seconds. We would have more flexibility there. I'm going to give him extra time.
You could achieve a
if we
similar
were
end.
exchanging load.
I mean, the OSD is not going to kill the peer, right? It's going to tell the monitor to. So if the monitor has a way of querying load averages, it can do the same filtering on its end.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure who. Is that how that works? The OSD.
Yeah, the OSD reports it down, and then the monitor decides whether to actually mark it down or not. And the monitor is already adjusting the grace period based on past reports that have been false. So there could be more inputs to that, like load average, or like I was suggesting in chat, disk utilization too.
Yeah, it will help
Would it
if
make
we are
any
talking.
sense? Go ahead,
Yeah, it
Mika.
will help. Yeah, from the support point, I mean, we have seen so much of these disk utilization. We always see like when we try to troubleshoot slow requests or like performance issues, we try to see like if it is because of network or because network the OSD is not responding because the OSD disk itself is so much busy. So if we get the disk utilization in this Ceph daemon manager output from OSD and then one column as a percentage utilization, it will be very much clear that okay, this OSD has highest disk utilization as compared to the others. So because load average would be global to the node, but the disk utilization would be per OSD.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Would it be worth going a step further and trying to capture something like perf dump at the same time?
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. We'll over time probably want to grab several pieces of information as inputs to the is this OSD really dead decision.
Oh, and I already mentioned this last item about understanding the network topology
Yeah.
to potentially identify like a failed switch.
I think once this information is reported up to the manager, then you can write some Python in the manager to go look at it to identify patterns.
Maybe we could even have like a cool graphic in the dashboard at some point.
Yeah.
Like red links and green links.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like a
So
great start to me, though.
So
I
I
had a
wonder if,
question though,
go
but
ahead.
if we start adjusting the grace based on certain load conditions or disk utilization conditions, there should be a limit as to how much we are adjusting. At some point, we should probably not
Yeah.
auto adjust. There should be a hard stop at some point. Maybe like do it 2 iterations or 3 iterations and then maybe report it and then let the user decide whether.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a slow OSD is still slow. Just because we know why doesn't mean it's okay.
Exactly my point.
I
A good
think it's more
excuse.
if they're all slow in a systematic fashion. I think that's the really interesting case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then you'd have to either mark them all out or none of them out. That's when I think we're most worried about a storm.
So that's all I had here.
Okay. Good to me. Nice shirt.
I just have one thought about the naming. These are just like tracking OSD ping times. In the future, might we want to do some kind of network monitoring among other daemons too? So should we have like OSD in the name of these things? Or we could just add more structures later.
Might not be a bad idea to add OSDs just to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess, what do you mean by that? I mean, it does say OSD in the, dump network, like dump OSD.
Yeah, like dump
something.
OSD network, or maybe within the JSON have like a be within an OSD section. So we can add more sections to the JSON later.
Ah, okay.
The health alert code could have OSD in the name. But yeah, seems okay. Okay. Anything else on that one? All right. All right, the next one up is muting health alerts. We talked about this a little bit on the list, and I forget when. Maybe it was another CDM. I just wrote down what we had in the email in the pad and cleaned it up a little bit. The pad, share screen too. Okay, so the idea would be that you have a number of alerts that come and go. You could additionally have a mute that the monitor will record, and a mute is associated with one of those codes, and it has a time to live. I guess one question is, if don't specify a time to live, does it just mute it forever, or do you enforce a maximum time to live? Could go either way. But you'd specify which alert you want to mute and how long you want to mute it. And it'll then just go look at the current alert that matches that, and it'll also keep track of some additional stuff to match that particular instance of that alert. We could have a wildcard that'll mute everything. I'm not sure if that's helpful or not. It might be nice if you're on the CLI, but it's also like, why would you want to mute everything without knowing exactly what you're muting? So who knows? I don't have a strong opinion on that one. But once you have things muted, everything you ever look at will also tell you that things are muted, so that you are aware of it. So Ceph-S, for example, will say health okay, but it'll tell you I have 2 muted alerts. And when you do health detail, it'll show you a lot more. It'll show you exactly what's muted and why, presumably, to figure out what the nice syntax for that is. But the main thing is that when the mute is recorded, it takes I think we'll start with initially just a summary string. And if the summary string changes, then the mute sort of automatically goes away. So if the description changes, or the alert goes away, or the TTL expires, or you unmute, then mute will go away. And some basic commands to do that. We'd want to expose all this on oh, go ahead.
That's going to be weird, like just for the example of my network thing, because it reports the largest ping time problem. So if you're having a problem with your switch and it would be a problem to be looking at the description and saying, oh, the description changed. Yeah.
So basically the rest of this pad is all about how to deal with that, because each health alert is a little bit different. But at the like phase 0 would just be to match the description, just to get the rest of the pieces in place. But the real challenge is around when to unmute things. And I think we're just going to need a bunch of different modes, because each health alert behaves a little bit differently. So for example, OSD down, it'll say like 2 OSDs down. So probably if you go from 2 OSDs down to 1 OSD down, then you don't want to unmute. But if those 2 OSDs resolved and then a new OSD went down, then maybe you do. So probably you actually want to look at like the set of which OSDs it is, and as long as the set shrinks, then it's fine. And if the set grows, then it unmutes. Other things like degraded, and there's a percentage, there's a number that you want to like decrease versus increase. Maybe we just look at the detail items. So each alert has a bunch of details that actually say like which OSD has failed. So as long as the detail item goes away, then it's fine. But if a new one appears, then it wouldn't be fine. But even that's a little bit tricky, because there's always a cap on those. There's always like a maximum of 30, I think it is. After which point it just says plus 700 other OSDs or something like that, to sort of bound the whole set. So it's a little bit tricky. But I think initially, the idea would be to just have a couple different modes, and then probably have one that's default, and then in the code say like this particular health alert, use this other mode. They can sort of use something that's appropriate. We might need to go back and adjust exactly what the detail strings look like for the different health alerts so that they behave a little bit better. But phase one would just be to like try to get something that like sort of works well enough. And then phase two would be, if we like want to be really precise, then I think right now the health alerts are all structured as a summary string and then a list of strings. That's the detail. To make that a little bit more structured. So, have like some scalar value that might be used for some health alerts, like 0.7% degraded or something, or maybe have a set of integers for the OSD one where like you actually have the set of OSDs that are down, or whatever it is, the set of PGs, maybe something like that. Go back and figure out what structured elements might be appropriate so that they can be a little more precise. But I think kind of that depends on if we can cover most of the health alerts in a pretty decent way with something pretty simple, with just like a handful of different modes for unmuting, then that might be good enough too, without getting too carried away.
Yeah, I certainly like the idea of starting off simpler and seeing if the more complex things are necessary.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure if we end up needing to be that so precise in their phase two.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing I'm worried about is the health alerts that are like, they have 5% degraded or something like that, because those values, that number is constantly changing and presumably slowly ramping down to 0, and so ideally I'd be able to mute it as long as it continues to decrease. But maybe there's an easier way to do that. Like maybe we just like parse a floating point value out of the string or something in one of the modes, and then use that like a decreasing rule or something. Maybe a quick hack is good enough. Not getting too.
I guess we also talked about potentially letting you specify thresholds that would be for things like this where it's a percentage to distinguish between health warn and health error or health okay. Maybe like a 1% degraded is okay in your cluster, but 20% is a warning and 50% is an error. Nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think those are like per health alert, adding additional options to parameterize what the behavior should be. A lot of the alerts already have one or more settings that sort of control when to alert, whether to alert at all, or what the threshold is that a warning state is. And so we could, go through one by one and say like, are there ways that we'd like to modify the behavior of this particular health alert? Add options for those. But I think that is orthogonal to the muting part, because the mute is
at least the basic kind.
Yeah.
Would we allow users to mute any warning, or are we going to select which warnings we are allowing?
Any warning.
Okay.
Sure. I have to go look at I'm not sure if there's like a warning that's so severe that we'd want to prevent them from muting. Health messages. And find the like mon down, clock skew. Yeah, I don't know if any of these are like so bad. Yeah. Okay.
I
Any
guess I
other?
could, yeah, I guess I could see a scenario where, given that you want to do this automated unmute, where I want to override that. Like maybe I'm migrating to a brand new rack, and I'm gonna get certain warnings because I'm gonna, be having misplaced objects, I guess, if I out OSD slowly on my old rack and going to the new rack. So it's definitely going to go up and down. So
Mhm.
if you're going to do automated unmute, I could imagine a case where you want to mute it and say, but don't automatically unmute.
Like preserve the mute, make the mute sticky,
Yeah.
remute maybe. Yeah, I could see that.
Maybe that's the default mode, and
Yeah.
you can even implement the automated unmuting later.
Yeah, I could do that. Or just have could have a flag on the mute, whether it's sticky or not. So that even if the description changes or it resolves, it would stick around. Something like that.
Or there are three modes. There's forever, which is the stickiest, until it resolves is a little less sticky, and then
If the description
if the
changes.
description changes, it's just the most temporary.
Yeah, I'm worried about making it too complicated so people don't understand how it's going to behave. How would you describe those? Can't think of an
Permanent,
adjective that goes
forever
phrase.
for the strongest, maybe.
Yeah, it's not really
Or,
permanent though, because the TTL is there too.
Could that just be like a
right.
lack of TTL
Oh,
means
for
forever?
4 hours. Right. Well, forever, but no, but it. Oh, so
But it
is
still resolves if it goes away though.
yeah. The time to live is. Yeah, how about dash dash until, so you have time to live and until, and then the until has an option, like resolved, until changed, until changes.
So it'd be like till changed, resolved.
Yeah. But if you have a time to live and then
I think the idea is that the time to live would trump everything. So as soon as the time TTL expires, then it just goes away no matter what.
right. But what if like my rack to rack example or whatever, I'm doing some sort of maintenance over a period of time. I don't even necessarily specify a time to live, but as long as so is that the first, is that the no options at all?
Yeah,
It
yeah, there'd be
has no time to live and it has no unmuting of any sort because you didn't do the until.
Well, I kind of think that the default should be sort of the less sticky version. So that if it says one OSD down and you're just like, mute, and then suddenly a 5 OSD is down, like it feels like it should unmute.
Right. So changed is the default. So that
Yeah.
means you have to add another until option though, like the forever or permanent or because you might if you specify that first one with the until forever, then you've really got the stickiest and it's
Yeah.
just not going to unmute until you say so.
Yep.
So why can't we just keep the TTL and have a forever flag only when we want it to mute forever? Otherwise, the TTL kind of overrides the changed and the resolved, right?
Well, because this until is not really about TTL, it's about the forever isn't about TTL, it's about whether the description alert or the alert resolves.
Right. I'm just saying that if you're using explicitly the flag forever, you don't really care about that warning, right? So that it kind of overrides the TTL or how long it actually should be warning about, as the example that David was giving.
But you might, yeah, I mean, I guess you might want that though, right? You might want to keep the mute even if the description and alert are changing, but still have a TTL of 2 days. But forever might not be the right word, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe sticky.
I just think we are just providing too many options, and it's just going to confuse people
Exactly.
further. So
Yeah.
I want to keep it simplistic. Just one flag. If you don't like what we are telling you, to do one flag.
I kind of like just having sticky and not this other stuff, just to, well, so even if it resolves or even if it changes, mute will stick around. Because they're not that dissimilar, right? If an alert like disappears and comes right back again, that's not that different than if the description changes or like going from 1 OSD down, 2 OSD down, OSD down, 0 OSD is down, 2 OSD is down. All kind of, I don't know, they're similar.
Yeah, there's a requirement form, like if you have, most of the time we disable scrub and deep scrub, and it goes into health one, and it's not something very much health one. So people want sometimes running it for a month in that scenario.
Right.
So sticky will help in that, I think.
Well, in that case, you wouldn't do sticky because you probably want the mute to go away if you set no out in addition to no scrub.
Why would you want to warn scrubs if you that you have no scrub set, or when you would set no out?
Or sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding that. Maybe this isn't the example you were saying, but sometimes people like set no deep scrub on the cluster for like extended periods of time. And so being able to unmute that or to mute that would make sense.
Right.
But you probably want, it's the same health code as if you have like no down or no up or something like that. And so the description changes, you probably want to unmute. But just setting a TTL of like 1 week, whatever, I think.
Right. Well, that's not going to have a description change. It's going to have, like, if they unset it, it'll go away, and then if they set it again, you don't want the mute to still be there, probably.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Which is.
Or if you set some other no flag and the description changes, then you want to unmute because you want to see the other one. I think that's the important thing.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't know how the no scrub and the no deep scrub, are they independent warnings or are they?
It's the same. It's like the warning is called OSD flag, and it lists all the flags that are set. So it'll list like no out, no in, no up, no scrub,
Uh,
Oh,
no whatever.
okay.
That's
so
why it's
that's
Oh,
So it
right.
might
Well,
be,
that's bad. They don't want to. They don't want to. They don't want to warn on other flag. I mean, they would want. They could
right.
potentially want to warn on other flag changes.
right.
So
But see,
we
that's
got
the
a real
thing.
problem on that one.
If you make the mute go away if the description changes, which would be the default behavior, then if you set one of those other flags, it unmutes and you see the health warning again.
yeah,
I think
suppose
it's
you
fine.
set like no down and then unset no down again, but you still have no do scrub set, then you still got warnings
Then
about no
you have to
scrubs.
reset the mute, I guess,
Yeah.
at that point.
So maybe it would be helpful to make
Break those up.
that warning more granular.
Yeah, yeah. But at least in the without doing that, I think the default behavior will be safe, fail safe or whatever. Right. We err on the
No
side
with
of
more warnings.
being slightly more annoying, but not hiding things that you should see.
So the default is not sticky.
Yeah. Yeah. And no TTL. Okay. Well, let's start with that and then play with it and see. I think the real interesting part is going to be when during this phase where you look at each health code and you look at what the messages look like and see how many modes have to be implemented. Hopefully not very many. And hopefully they'll provide decent behavior, but find out.
And maybe this means we should have every flag as an independent warning instead of a flag warning.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, right now it's just yeah. All right. That should be enough to get started.
Okay.
All right.
Next
Pull
is
request.
slow request diagnostics. We already talked a little bit about some of this during the network ping time stuff. So that we're just trying to brainstorm various ways that we could figure out what's actually causing requests to be slow, and what kinds of things we could do. We could add to either logging or as warnings, or just being able to surface more information to diagnose things. So in terms of disks being too busy, we have the suicide timeouts right now, which end up making OSDs crash and can kind of be confusing to users since they see an OSD crash and not really necessarily understand why. So that's one thing that we could improve there, just making that have some clear message in the log. Potentially being reported to the monitor too, I guess, or the manager.
We could put that in the crash report. Just realized. That's a pretty easy thing.
Speaking of the crash reports, are they surfaced anywhere? Like if there is a crash, is it listed in
Not yet. That is a 2D because I wasn't sure how to do it. Health things for crashes. And I think it's basically because I didn't know how to mute them. So if you do crash ls, you can see all the crashes, like historically forever. So the question is, like, do you do a health alert if there's a new crash? And if so, for how long do you warn for before it goes away? Yeah, I don't know. Or do you like delete it? Do you like have an ACK, like I acknowledge that this crashed and I've looked at it and therefore the health warning goes away? Or do you mute it? No, I wasn't really sure what the right metric was, so I didn't
Can the
make
user
health
like
alerts.
delete the crashes or something?
They can, but you kind of don't want to delete them, right? You just want to you'd like to have a record of them all, and they want to make sure they all get phoned home and all that.
Right, right.
I think I like the ACK idea that I've seen. I mean, it's indirectly muting, but yeah.
Where you
Or
ACK it.
call it archive. If
Yeah.
you've archived it, it's
Crash
not a
ACK.
warning anymore, and it's
And then once you
Yeah.
have the mutes in place, you can ignore if your OCs are crashing a bunch at once.
If it's been phoned home, couldn't we get rid of it then?
Kind of. I mean, you want to tell the operator that something bad happened, and you want to tell the developers something bad happened, and I think they're disjoint. Right? Just because it's been phoned home and we'll eventually maybe find out about it doesn't mean that you don't want to tell the operator. Archive.
But you could come up with some arbitrary time saying, if it's been phoned home and it's older than 3 months,
Yeah.
archive it. And if it's older than 6 months and hasn't been looked at, delete it.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's already a retention interval, so they automatically get discarded after some amount of time. This archive all. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so going back to the disks being too busy or potentially failing, we might also capture some other metrics, like things like the queue depth at various levels, at the object store level or at the OSD level, and make sure that we're exposing those through proof counters, or potentially reporting those as metadata to the manager on a periodic basis. I guess, as Vicky had mentioned earlier, tracking like disk utilization as well.
I really like the idea of logging the disk utilization value that you'd see from IOStat as a perf counter. So it just gets fed up to I don't know how you get it. I don't know where that number is coming from. Probably from block or something somewhere, but that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure we could see what IOStat's doing, replicate that.
Yeah. It'd be a little bit wonky because it's actually a per physical device thing.
Right.
I think, or maybe it's per partition. I don't actually know. That we
I
can
think it's
just figure
per
out.
petition,
Okay.
but we can figure it out if it's like a block thing, then we can go and query that for whatever device we're using. And for each of the devices, I guess, if we have multiple devices.
Right. Yeah, it'll get a little weird on the back end because you might have multiple OSDs sharing an SSD and all reporting the same utilization, or whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
But in that case, you still want to know that that disk is busy.
Yep, I like that.
Anything else we could gather at the OSD level to try to figure out what's going on with the disk? We already have perf counters for things like commit times and latencies and
I think that the one that bothers me, I can't think of anything else that we just want to like generate raw data for, but the thing that bothers me is that if an OSD fails because it gets an IO error and it crashes, that's logged in the crash report, but nothing ever looks at that, and the cluster doesn't know that it failed because the device failed. It just knows that the OSD is down.
Yes, that's a very good point.
So
that's another case where we kind of crash the OSD and don't report anything, right?
Yeah, we don't know why, and there's no like, yeah, it would be nice. You have to go in manually and like go look and see why it crashed to decide whether to replace the device or do something else or whatever. Never been clear to me like what the workflow should be. I guess the manager could see a crash report come in, see that it crashed because of an EIO, and then set an additional flag on the OSD or on the device. It actually, I think, knows the device, so it can mark the device as failed somehow. But even then, it's like, what is, and this is the whole thing with all the failure prediction stuff. It's like, what does failed mean? Is it that you got one IO error once, or is it that you got too many of them, or because with BlueStore, most of the time when you get an IO error on read, we can fix it. Like we'll use the replica to repair. And when that happens, like we don't do anything, right? I mean, the system recovers, but like we don't persist any record that we had to do that. And so if a device is hitting like lots of failures, then like we should probably.
Do we have a perf counter for that?
No, yeah, I just added the repair num objects repaired is now a counter for that.
Number of errors repaired. These. So we could watch the number of IO errors on repaired OSDs. We could also watch for crashes due to IO errors. And in both cases, we want to like annotate the device to indicate is. Yeah.
Actually, num objects repaired is probably not too critical because you care about the disks. That's kind of a pool thing, so I think I'll.
Yeah, it's actually what we want is. It's actually it's an EIO errors on read. It's not actually about whether or not we repair. It's just whether we got an EIO and read. Hopefully, some recovery will happen after that.
Right, but no, that's the only way to. But the only way to get it is by looking at that number because it's all fixed out from under you. So that's why I'm showing that.
I'm saying we could add a perf counter so that we actually track the raw EIO error, I guess.
Okay. Right.
I guess again, that would have to be per device.
Yeah.
So for both the suicide timeouts and the IO errors that we aren't repairing them, I guess right now we're kind of just asserting, and it could be easier to understand if we didn't just use this assert there, but had a message in the log, then it's called like exit 0 or sorry, exit failure, and didn't generate a confusing dump of all the logs and backtrace information. People see like the OSD's timeout and then understand what that means. Or even get an EIO error and not understand that means the disk is filling.
So the error output now, at least, is better. Where is it? It so now it calls, if it's a IO error, it calls a function that makes it include it in the crash report, and it calls the abort message that says unexpected IO error. And I think it doesn't dump the logs. No, maybe it does. I can't remember. But we can make it not dump the logs.
But
Well, maybe
remember
it's
on
good
read now, it returns. Remember on read, it returns EIO to the caller. It does not crash
right.
in order
Exactly.
for the
So
repair stuff to work, which really
right.
confused Greg.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, every other thing has a crash here and not this. It must
Yeah.
be a mistake.
Rather than, yeah. So yeah, that's what I think the perf counter should be, so that when that happens, it bumps a counter. The manager will notice and mark the device somehow. So probably when you like list the devices, for example, it'll tell you the accumulated error counts, something like that. Or yeah, I don't know. That hard to say. Like a lot of these things are also part of the smart metrics, so it's confusing how much of this we want to like track ourselves. But anyway, okay. But we're gonna have perf counters for utilization. We can track the IO errors as a start. Should we keep going down the list?
Yeah, it's probably a lot of stuff for disks now.
Yeah.
So another common bottleneck is CPU. So we talked a little bit already about just trying to track CPU load, and we just for adding that to the log periodically, just so that we have a record of what's going on if the user doesn't have some kind of other monitoring setup. That way, if we do like see an OSD suicide timeout or have some other issue, you at least have some idea of whether the CPU was a potential bottleneck. Could potentially keep some kind of history, but maybe just adding it to the log is a good place to start.
I think there's a perf counter for the load average.
Oh, there is?
Yep. So in principle, that should be going into, well, if you have a Prometheus running, then it'll go into Prometheus.
Yeah, that's the thing. Folks don't have Prometheus or other collecting tool.
But yeah, we could dump it in the log.
Yeah, and like we were discussing earlier, we could also send this periodically to the manager, along with other metrics that we're gathering.
So given the fact that it's a perf counter, the manager already has it, and it keeps a brief history. Right. So probably we just want to like, if anything, we'd want to like make the manager watch it. So like issue a health warning if the load's above some number or something. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess the manager could also try to diagnose if there's some issue on a given host or a given rack or some other kind of commonality. Are all the disks in this host busy, or all the CPUs in this host busy? Going along with the network ping times. So I guess we'd end up using the similar kinds of code there. Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
point about adding it for other daemons too. We've certainly seen this happen on the monitors with RocksDB and LevelDB going CPU crazy.
I just get nervous about getting too carried away because this is one of those things where you can start down a path, but if you most of the larger installations already have all this stuff feeding into something like Prometheus, and then they have all their Prometheus alerts
Right.
defined based on those metrics. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Mhm.
So I'd be inclined to do just like the minimum.
This might be a
Minimum.
case where the sort of maintainability burden for small clusters is just very different from big ones. They're never going to
Yeah.
implement those kinds of things, so this might,
Right.
some amount of reinvention here might be helpful, in other words.
Right. But we should invent what's sufficient for a small cluster, I guess. So probably something pretty simple.
Yes, maybe a perf counter for every daemon.
And then just say an option like warn on CPU load 25 or something.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
So a large cluster might disable a bunch of these features
Sure.
also.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so beyond the basic physical resources in the system, we also wanted to add some more specific warnings for things that we do know about, like OMAP databases getting too large. I think the tricky part here is figuring out what a good threshold is. For file store, it might have been like 20 gigabytes, but for Blue Store, it seems to be in the hundreds of gigabytes range. It's going to vary pretty heavily, I think, based on the workload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we can warn on size. Of the
Well, we
overall
could, we
database.
just might be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess not sure it's useful to do it.
And we did already lower the per object map warning, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Which is still pretty relevant since you can have lots of activity blocks by a single object being under recovery.
Yeah, I think that one makes a lot of sense.
I think that like the per OSD size warning still might make sense if we decide like a very conservative kind of high limit by warn. Say your database is like 500 gigabytes.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on what type of data you're storing. If the OSD is used for metadata or whatever bucket indexes, then it should be 100% of the device size, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing right now. If the database itself is large enough, then you're going to have
No
RocksDB
problems.
levels that are large enough that are going to cause you very large stalls.
Right. Yeah. So maybe this could be expressed as a ratio. Well, not a stall per se.
It's not really related to the device size though. It's just related to the absolute size of the database.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it seems like in principle, if you had a really cold 100% OMAP data set, you should be able to fill the device. Right?
Sure. Yeah. If you're not doing any writes to it at all, then it's no problem.
Except that compaction needs like double the space to compact, right? So if you hit 50% of the device for your metadata, then you have a problem, more or less.
Yeah. So this is where in Octopus, like charting the RocksDB into multiple column families is going to help quite a bit.
Yeah.
But prior to that, it might be useful to have a warning.
So we could warn it like 0.5, I guess, of device size. I'm just nervous about saying like 100 gigs or picking a number because
This is going to vary so much per workload.
it's going to vary based on device size and the device speed and the amount of CPU you have and a million other things. But at least the ratio, that's like a known issue. Doesn't matter. You won't be able to compact it if you don't have about 50%.
Yeah, and that rate, that's like 50% of your fast and slow devices at that point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's not so useful then if we can't figure out like a reasonably useful value that's applicable to most workloads.
Yeah. And I think this shouldn't really ever happen, hopefully. but if it does, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you hit this, then we should just probably call ourselves full or something like that. Well, except you might actually be compacting, so I guess you can't do that either. Okay, we'll warn. Okay.
Okay, so last bit here was about trying to kind of analyze what's happening in the cluster, or let a human do the analysis based on a bit more data. So Michael Kidd has written some scripts for parsing the Ceph.log and kind of putting this into a kind of a spreadsheet format where you can look at things over time or in on a pro-OSD basis, try to see if there's like events that are correlated with slow requests in the log.
Interesting.
So in the GitHub page there's some screenshots of what it looks like in OpenAtlas.
Pretty cool.
So you might see if you can just visually spot a trend of like a bunch of OSDs are scrubbing around this time, and there were slow requests appearing shortly afterward.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I guess my question would be, is there something that we can pull out from this that would make sense to put somewhere in Ceph, like a manager module or something that would maybe even in the future try to automate some of the analysis?
It seems like you could do like a heat map type of thing with this. I mean, a lot of these events are perf counters, so we probably already have manager.
I guess there's a bunch about kind of just looking at the PG states, OSD states.
Yeah, it's mostly like we used to pass the cluster log, and that is the whatever 6 Joule. I mean, we removed a lot of data from the cluster logs in Luminous. So earlier it used to have like a lot of information from the IOPS point of view, recovery IOPS point of view, deep scrubbing states, what type of slow requests are coming, how much time they are taking, how many number of OSDs, how much time deep scrub is taking, like these kind of stats from the cluster logs. And I think Michael Kidd has written a script which takes some interval and it just graphs it to a CSV file and just I think we were thinking if we can have something manager module or something to the dashboard where we can just click and these kind of graph, sorting we can do from that rather than doing it manually from the script.
I guess the dashboard is already exposing like the current PG state. It's quite a fair bit. Maybe it would make sense to have some kind of historical view.
Yeah. Like report, like if the deep scrub is running, so like reporting what is an average deep scrub timing for each PG interval. Like if it's taking 1 minute, 2 minutes, or if there is some impact from the like because of deep scrub, if there is an impact in the slow request because of deep scrub, something like that. So yeah, but this is only been we use this all because of the troubleshooting. So yeah, if you want to troubleshoot something, you go to the dashboard and start looking into where the maximum time is being utilized. And this is all to check if a cluster is reporting slow requests, what is the reason behind it? Is it deep scrub? Is it the disks are busy because of some other split? Like earlier, it used to be file store split. Now with Blue Store, we can think of like DB is doing some spillover, or maybe some compaction is running, which is taking a lot of time, which is causing CPU busy or something.
So I guess a few of those causes will be captured now by different kinds of warnings we have. Like we have the warning for spillover master now, and with the added information we're thinking about with the like CPU perf counters, that would give you some context for what the CPU looks like.
Yeah, I think what I understood from David's explanation, when we combine this network thing and this, I think there will be way better information what we will have for troubleshooting as compared to now. Networking and the more information from the slow request point of view, I think will give us a lot of data for troubleshooting.
Maybe one thing to look at is that what exactly can you get out of the post-processing and is useful, and it's currently not covered by the existing commands. Is that is the set we should kind of identify.
Yep.
And probably Vikyat, you have more first-hand experience of what that set would look like, considering the new improvements that have gone in.
Yeah, I think as per whatever I understood from this call, I think a lot of it being covered. Networking was one of the major thing. We have always struggled in Ceph, like finding. We have to do a lot of work to find out it's a networking issue because there's a lot of interconnecting devices are there. So I think the one feature which David mentioned that could be already covered in future, like we will have more information that if the interconnecting device like switch is causing an issue. So I think most of the things are already covered, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like the main thing that's not covered by the things we've talked about so far is just the past PG states and recovery and cluster IO stats, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is that stuff already being captured by the dashboard though? Sage, do you remember?
The past PG states.
Yeah.
It has the current snapshot of the PG states. It's not trying to remember anything.
Okay, well,
Is that what
maybe
you're looking
it's something
for?
to, yeah, maybe something to bring up with Linz and see if he has ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I've wondered is if there should be a way to like capture the log for a specific PG. Whenever there is like an annoying bug and something goes wrong and the OC is crashing or it gets hung during pairing or whatever, like we have to turn on the whole logs for the whole OSD, but it's just one PG that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Or it's like the PG is stuck in a particular state and we can't figure out why from the query. And so we have to go turn on logs so we can get that one PG and make it reappear. It makes me wonder if it would make sense to be able to set a logging level on a per PG basis. Like kind of like the way you can do it per OSD, but per PG. We'd set the config option that way. That would be one thing. Or alternatively, if all the log messages out of the peering state machine, like peering state basically should be retained in memory, have a high level of in-memory retention. So that if you do hit a crash, like you have it, like it has up to like debug level 10 at least. That.
Seems like you might have to keep quite a few of those around if you have a lot of PGs.
Yeah, but it's usually, usually don't have that many PGs, right? You usually have like, so like,
yeah, averaging
and if
hundreds
it's just
OSD.
peering related messages, then they're probably like, I don't know, you could keep like the last 1,000 messages. That would be probably plenty. I think that's actually not that much. Right?
Sorry, did you debug a peering problem? 1,000 might be enough, but I think often it won't be.
But it seems like usually the problem is like during like get info, get log, and it like is failing to just either it hits some crazy obscure assert or it's just failing to pick a good primary and it goes into down or whatever.
If we could just capture the state transitions for a particular PG, that could also
That's
give
all
us.
we do. Well,
That's
I
all.
think we do that,
Yeah, we've got that one right.
but that one's not very.
Yeah, but we need to probably add more information there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're probably right though. Just the most recent 1,000 lines from a PG would at least tell you whether more logging would help. Because sometimes you don't even know that much.
Yeah. Although, as a practical matter, probably all PGs are really in the same bucket. Even if you change it from the OSD channel to like the appearing channel, something like that, and you set a higher threshold just with the retention or whatever. That might even be enough. Maybe you have to have a larger window, but otherwise we'd have to make a. Well, I mean, we can make a special debug macro for all the peering state messages that go into a separate channel. And so when you do a PG query, you could actually like get the log or something like it. I don't know. It feels like a bit like a Band-Aid, but something to think about. Because when people are like, when QA is like, we want a tool that is going to go gather the logs to crash, like what you really want is to reproduce it with debug OSD 20 and then go grep out that PG out of like whatever the appropriate OSD is. Like if there was a way to automate that, it would be really nice.
Sometimes you want more than just the PG, right? You need like the object store logs or something else too for all related operations.
Sometimes, yeah.
But yeah, there's the PG by itself would be a good start.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the first thing that we try to do. So
The Ceph1 bugs are like PG won't go active. So usually it's the or it's crashing during peering or something like that. But the bulk of them are. I don't know. Something to think about. Okay. This feels like a lot to do. Probably
Yeah,
nice to
it's a
get
long
this
list of
started.
stuff, but
But a lot of these are really simple, right? Like
yeah.
just add a metric for foo and so on. So
Yeah, a lot of them are add perf counters, add potential warnings
yeah,
for the manager.
yep. I turn some of these into tickets.
Any other thoughts on diagnosing other kinds of problems in general?
Not really. I think once we have the crash dump phone home, that'll
Yeah.
once we start creating a database,
Yeah.
that'll go a long way, because it's always nice to know that a problem you're seeing has been seen before. Like it's
Yep.
kind of reassuring in a way. You know, it eliminates certain hardware problems and things like that.
Yep. And if you know when it started
Yeah.
happening and so on. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for situations where too much information is barely enough.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could like find out if a bunch of crashes are happening in the wild that we don't see in QA, or if we see something happens like once in QA and we never find it again, that it's happening out there too.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yep. Now, you know what we should
So
do
is
is make the Ceph task do a Ceph crash LS shutdown. So as it's tearing everything down, it'll just, if there are any crashes, then it will raise a health alert or fail to run or whatever.
and dump the back
Although
at the same time?
it already does it actually, because we already know
Yeah.
if the OSD's its daemons crash. So I guess there's nothing new there. But it could make a database of like crashes that we see in QA, and then you could cross-reference that with the ones that are seen in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Might be useful. If I can figure out a way to.
Doing the crash dump at the end of a run might make things more clear. Like in some cases when the daemons crash and they don't produce the output in the log or in the Tutology log.
Or they crash multiple times or whatever it is.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
So is the crash database out there and running now? For folks who are running Nautilus already?
Yeah, so everything's phoning home and it's getting archived. Dan was working on the back end, just trying to figure out how Elasticsearch works and what the best way to actually use it is. So there's some like processing that needs to happen in order to feed it get it in a form that's actually useful.
Mm.
And there's like the crash dump parts of it that you just have to like extract the actual dump, make them separate records, and put them in one particular table or database or whatever. And then the telemetry is similar, where you have to associate them with a particular cluster and you only really care about the most recent report for a single cluster and so on. So there's some like, so he's working on that, but he got distracted. He's doing the registry stuff for Ceph CI right now.
Sure.
Getting that all stuff sorted out first and go back to it.
So we have but people can upload their crashes at least right now, and we can figure out.
Yeah. So we're archiving them. Yeah, we just can't like bury them yet, right? Yep. And incidentally, there's I had an RFC request. Love to hear comments on. That's basically adding a concept of a channel to the telemetry. So there would be the basic channel, which is like the basic cluster stats, what version you're running, how many OSDs you have, how much data you're storing, that sort of thing. There'd be the crash channel, which is all the crash dumps. And then eventually we'd add the device channel, which is all the device health metric telemetry. And in theory, we could add other channels. The idea just being that you could turn them on and off. So you might not want to report crashes, or maybe you do, but you don't want to phone home your cluster size, whatever it is. It could be granular control over those things. Yeah, it's a little bit weird because the telemetry and crashes are going to go into one database, which is like for the Ceph clusters. The device health metrics, the intention is for that to go into a different data set. That's not necessarily just Ceph, but might actually be phoning home to a different location.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to like just keep it simple. So they're just channels and you turn them on and off. Sort of independent of what the mechanism is that they actually get phoned home. I think is all that the user cares about.
Have we thought about ways to get more users to enable the module?
So we could, yeah, I think the main thing is like that. I want the dashboard to have a pop-up every time you upgrade that says, do you want to enable this? Yes, no, don't ask me again type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Could put something like Ceph-S.
You could
be
disabled
for some setting.
Yeah, we could do like a health thing or a Ceph-S thing. Yeah, I don't know. We could have like instead of just on and off, we could have like an ask state. And after every major upgrade, it goes back to ask. You have to turn it back off again or something. I don't know. Yeah. I think the next thing I was waiting for was for the dashboard to have a pop-up. We'll see how far that gets us.
Yeah.
But mostly what I really want is, I want to know, and when somebody says no, I want to know why. Is it just like, I don't have the energy to think about it? Is it like, I don't want to report this particular metric?
Mm-hmm.
Or, whatever it is. That'd be helpful. All right.
Yeah, maybe when they do the upgrade using the dashboard, they'd have to first fill that out, whether you want to turn this module on after the upgrade. And if they say no, you capture the reason. You should have options like ABC, why did you turn it off? Exactly.
Yeah.
So that they make a choice during upgrade. That's how most pieces of software these days are made. So
yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. Okay, we should talk to Lens about that. All right. Anything else we should discuss? We're ready for bed.
Yeah, it's late in the East Coast, I guess.
Dinner. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
See you later.
Take care.
Good
Bye.
night.